What do you do when the storm takes the road, the bridge, and every safe path you thought you had? What do you do when the only thing left standing is a man you barely know and the rising river that wants to take you both? The rain had battered the valley for 3 long days. It came heavy and angry, falling in sheets that turned the hills into streaming cuts of mud. The river below them had broken its banks sometime in the night. It swallowed fences, tore out trees, and pulled the old wooden bridge apart like it was nothing more than dry bark. The broken planks floated down the gorge in wild spins, knocking against rocks as if fighting for one last grip on land. Jacob Miller stood at the edge of that swollen river with his hat pulled low and his coat soaked through. Mud clung to his boots halfway to the ankle, and the wind slapped cold water against his face, but he didn't move. He watched the current drag branches, fence posts, even a section of someone's roof past him. The far bank might as well have been a world away. Behind him lay the wreck of his wagon. It had tipped on its side in the night, wheel half buried in mud. One of the horses had slipped in panic and twisted its leg. The other stood trembling, too tired to fight the storm any longer. But none of that was what he looked at first. He looked at her. She was standing beside the fallen wagon, arms tight around herself, skirt soaked up to her thighs, hair hanging in damp strands around her face. Her name was Anna Reed. He knew it from a letter she carried. Folded so many times the edges had turned soft. She had not told him who she ran from. She had not told him why she was traveling alone on a dangerous road in the middle of a storm. She had not told him why her hands shook when thunder rolled. And he had not asked. He had found her 2 mornings ago walking barefoot along Miller Ridge, clothes torn at the hem, carrying nothing but a small carpet bag. She had climbed into his wagon when he offered a ride, quiet as a shadow, curling herself around her bag like she feared someone might take even that. Now the storm had stopped them both. The river roared in front of him like a living thing, loud and wild. He watched the water surge high, the color of dark glass filled with silt. Downstream, a fallen pine had wedged between 2 rocks. The river slammed against it, splitting around it in furious white foam. "We can't stay here," Anna said. Her voice was hoarse, rough from days of silence, but steady. Jacob turned to look at her. Rain dripped from her jaw, her lashes, the tips of her fingers. She looked tired, cold, and ready to keep going even if every step hurt. "I'll carry you," he said. He didn't say it to sound brave. He said it because it was the only way across. The current would sweep her off her feet in seconds if she tried to walk it alone. Anna stared at him, something between fear and trust flickering in her eyes. For a moment she didn't move. Then she nodded. Jacob crouched and held out his arms. She stepped into them without hesitation, like someone stepping off a cliff and hoping the ground would rise to meet them. The river hit him like ice. It clawed at his legs, pushing him sideways. He steadied himself and took one slow step, then another. Each movement felt like pushing through a wall. The water reached his knees, then his thighs, then his waist. Anna wrapped her arms around his neck and held on, her breath warm against his cheek. "Don't look at the far bank," he said. "Just focus on me." She pressed her face closer, not in fear, in trust. Jacob wasn't a big man, but he was strong from years of ranch work. And he had the kind of strength that didn't shout. It held steady even when the world tilted. The river slammed against his ribs, trying to turn him. He planted his foot, then another. The cold burned. His arms ached. His breath came tight between waves. Anna didn't speak, but he felt her grip tighten when a wave hit hard. He tightened his hold too. Step by step, they moved through the churning water. By the time Jacob reached the far bank, his legs shook from the effort. He pushed through the last stretch, water falling away from him in thick sheets. Mud sucked at his boots as he climbed onto solid ground. But he didn't put her down. Not right away. Not when the rain slowed. Not when the wind eased. Not even when she whispered, "You can set me down now." He only nodded and carried her farther away from the river's roar toward the shelter of the trees. She didn't argue. They found a fallen cedar with a hollow beneath it. Dry ground, protected from the wind. He set her down only when he was sure the spot was safe. She pulled her wet skirt around her, shivering, arms wrapped close. Jacob stood in the rain a moment longer, breathing hard, watching the river as if it might rise up and chase them. Then he looked at her. She looked small in the shelter of the cedar, but not broken. Her eyes lifted to him, and something passed there, quiet, steady, a kind of gratitude that felt heavier than the storm. He didn't know her story. He didn't know what she fled. He didn't know how far they would travel or what waited ahead. But he did know one thing. He wasn't putting her down for long. Not after that river. Not after the look in her eyes. Not after the way she held on. And that was how it began. By morning, the rain had thinned into a soft mist that clung to the edges of the trees. The river still roared behind them, swollen and violent, but the worst of the storm had passed. A gray light spread slowly across the valley as Jacob stepped out from beneath the cedar's shelter and scanned the land around them. Everything looked washed clean and worn thin at the same time. Anna stirred beneath the branches, pulling his spare blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her hair was damp and tangled, her clothes still chilled from the night, but she sat upright with a steadiness he hadn't seen the day before. She wasn't fragile. Not really. She was something else. Something held together by will alone. Jacob crouched beside her and handed her a small piece of dried bread from his pack. "Eat," he said gently. "You'll need your strength." She accepted it without a word. Her fingers brushed his for the briefest moment, light as the mist around them. "We head north," he said. "There's a hunting cabin about a half-day from here. If the roof's still standing, we can dry off and get a fire going." Anna nodded, but her eyes were on the river. She watched it in silence, as if expecting someone to step out of the current. Her grip on the bread tightened slightly. "You think someone is looking for you?" Jacob asked. She didn't turn to him. "Yes." That was all she said. That single word carried fear, memory, and something harder, something colder. He didn't ask more. He didn't need to. They started walking through the wet grass, their boots sinking into the softened earth. The woods grew thicker as they moved, pine branches brushing their shoulders. Birds called weakly above them, still shaken by the storm. Anna walked carefully, each step measured. She didn't limp, but Jacob could see the chill had settled deep in her bones. She tried to keep pace with him without showing any weakness. It was a habit, one he recognized, one he'd seen in animals that had been chased too long. "You can tell me if you need to rest," he said. "I'm fine," she answered quickly. But she wasn't. Not completely. And he carried that knowledge the same way he had carried her across the river. When they reached the rise of a low hill, the sky broke open just enough to let in a line of pale sunlight. Steam lifted from the wet ground, turning the forest floor into a thin white haze. Jacob stopped for a moment, scanning the valley behind them. Tracks. He didn't see any yet, but his gut told him that what chased her hadn't given up. They reached the cabin by late afternoon. It rested in the lee of the hillside, half collapsed on one side, but still standing strong enough to shelter them. Jacob pushed the door open with his shoulder, and the hinges groaned in protest. The inside smelled of old smoke and damp wood. "It'll do," he said. Anna stepped inside, her hands rubbing her arms for warmth. He could see the tension in her shoulders loosen just a little when the wind was no longer biting at her. Jacob quickly built a fire in the stone stove, stacking dry kindling he found beneath a shelf. The flames caught slow, then rose bright, filling the cabin with a soft glow. Anna stood near the heat, eyes drifting closed for a moment as the warmth washed over her. He set his coat on a nearby peg and looked at her. She was still shivering, but less now. Her skin held some color again. "You should change," he said quietly. "Your clothes are soaked through. You'll freeze in the night." She hesitated, gripping the fabric of her skirt as if unsure whether she should trust his words or her fear. He reached into his pack and pulled out his spare shirt and blanket. "I'll hang a cloth across the corner," he said. "You'll have privacy." Her shoulders eased. She nodded once. When she stepped behind the makeshift curtain, Jacob kept his eyes on the fire, forcing his thoughts to stay steady. He could hear the soft rustle of fabric, the sound of wet clothes hitting the floor, the small sigh she let out when she wrapped herself in dry warmth. When she emerged again, wearing his shirt cinched at the waist, her hair loose around her shoulders, she looked different. Not just warmer, lighter. Like some part of the fear had loosened its grip. They sat near the fire, with only a few feet between them. The shadows danced along the walls, and outside the wind carried the last breaths of the storm away. Jacob took a slow sip from his canteen and looked at her carefully. "You want to tell me why someone might be following you?" he asked. She watched the fire for a long time before answering. "Because I ran," she said, "and they don't like it when someone runs." Her voice didn't shake, but something in her eyes did. Jacob nodded, not in judgment, in understanding. "Then we keep moving," he said. "North, through the pines. I'll make sure no one touches you." Anna turned her head, meeting his eyes. There was no fear in her gaze now, only something quiet, something growing. "You already did," she said softly. The fire cracked. The wind eased. And in the flickering light of that broken cabin, Jacob understood that he had crossed more than a river yesterday. He had crossed into her life. And now he wasn't walking out. The storm left the world washed and quiet. By morning, frost clung to the edges of the pine needles, and the air hung cold enough that each breath looked like smoke. Jacob rose before the sun fully cleared the hillside. He stepped outside the cabin, boots crunching softly over the thin crust of frozen ground. The woods stretched out before him in a hush he didn't trust. Quiet was good sometimes, but other times it meant something was waiting to break it. Inside, Anna stirred near the fire. She sat up slowly, pulling his blanket around her shoulders. Her hair fell over her face as she rubbed sleep from her eyes. He paused in the doorway watching her, something warm settling in his chest without asking permission. "You sleep at all?" she asked. "Enough," he said. She nodded, though she looked at him like she knew he was lying. They ate a small breakfast of dried meat and a little bread. Anna's hands felt steadier now. Her shoulders no longer curled inward like she expected someone to grab her at any moment. But the caution in her eyes stayed. It was a kind of memory the body did not forget. When they stepped outside to pack their things, the wind cut cold across the clearing. Anna glanced toward the tree line, scanning the shadows with sharp alertness. "Tracks," Jacob said. She stiffened. "Fresh?" "From last night." Her hands clenched at her sides. She didn't ask how many. She didn't have to. She already knew. Jacob tightened the strap on his pack and checked the revolver at his hip. Anna touched the handle of the small knife she now kept tucked into the waistband of her skirt. Neither spoke. Fear didn't have to be loud to be heard. They moved quickly through the forest, sticking to the narrow deer trails. Each broken branch, each disturbed patch of ground, made their steps faster. Anna kept beside him, her movements quiet, practiced. She didn't need reminding how to run. She'd learned long before he met her. But running was not enough now. When they reached a clearing near a shallow creek, Jacob stopped. The soil held impressions, boot prints, 3 sets, wide and careless. Anna stared at them like they were ghosts rising from the ground. "They're closing in," she whispered. "Then we're done running," Jacob said. She looked at him sharply, almost startled. "What do you mean?" "We need to turn this around," he said. "They're hunting you." So we stopped giving them the chance. Fear flickered across her features, quick as a breath. But something harder followed it, something that had been waiting for its moment. "When?" she asked. "Soon," he answered. "When they're close enough." They walked until midday, moving in silence and shadow. The forest grew thicker, branches arching like ribs over the path. Jacob watched the land as he walked. Every hill, every hollow, every angle that might hide a threat. Then he saw it. The fresh break of moss, the shape of a boot print half pressed into the dirt. "They're near," he said. Anna exhaled, steadying herself. Her hand drifted toward the small revolver he had given her the night before. For a moment she closed her eyes, as if pulling strength from somewhere deep where no one had ever looked before. "Tell me what to do," she said. Jacob moved closer. lowering his voice. "We find a place to hide, somewhere we can see them before they see us." They found a cluster of bent spruces hanging low over a small hollow. The branches formed a curtain thick enough to hide them from view. Jacob crouched behind a fallen log, knife in hand, while Anna climbed into the lowest branch of a spruce, the revolver steady in her grip. Twilight fell slowly, turning the woods into a maze of blue shadow. The wind quieted. Even the birds fell still. Then a twig snapped. Anna's breath held. Another footstep. Heavy. Slow. Then a man stepped into the clearing, shotgun slung across his chest. His eyes scanned the woods like he knew they were close. Anna didn't fire yet. She waited. Another man followed, then a third. They moved in a line, too close, too sure of themselves. Jacob felt his muscles coil. He waited for her signal. She waited for the right angle. Then one of the men stepped forward, cursing as he tripped over a root. Anna squeezed the trigger. The first man dropped instantly. The other two shouted, spinning in panic. One ran toward the log where Jacob hid. Jacob moved without hesitation. The knife flashed in the dim light. The man fell hard. The third tried to run for the trees, but Anna was already on the ground, revolver steady. One clean shot. Then there was silence. A heavy, echoing silence that filled the clearing until it felt like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Anna stood still, lowering the gun slowly. Her hands shook only a little. Her heartbeat pulsed hard beneath the collar of Jacob's shirt she still wore. "I thought I'd feel something," she said quietly. "I thought I'd feel afraid." "You will," Jacob said gently, "but not right now." He stepped toward her. She didn't move away. They buried the bodies the next morning. No markers, no names. Just earth over danger finally ended. When they finished, Anna stood by the creek with her arms wrapped around herself. She stared at the water, her reflection broken by the ripples. "I don't know where to go now," she said. "You don't have to know today," Jacob answered. She looked at him, really looked at him, the way someone looks when they realize the person beside them is no longer just protection, but something deeper, something steadier. "I still feel like I'm running," she whispered. Jacob stepped close. "Then run with me." Her breath caught, not in fear, in relief. Days passed as they moved higher into the mountains, but the fear didn't chase them anymore. Only the quiet. Only the sun rising slow over the peaks. Only the sound of two lives learning to breathe again. They found a valley where golden grass rolled like waves. A stream wound silver through the center. Cottonwoods shimmered pale in the breeze. Anna stopped, eyes softening, as if something inside her finally exhaled. "Is this it?" Jacob asked. She nodded slowly. "I think it is." They built a small shelter first, then a fire pit. Days flowed into one another, gathering wood, hunting rabbits, planting a small garden where the soil was dark and generous. Each evening they sat by the fire, not running, not hiding, just being. One night, she reached for his hand under the stars. He laced his fingers through hers. "When you carried me across the river," she said, voice low, "I thought you'd let me go once we reached the bank." He turned toward her. The firelight caught the softness in her eyes. "I didn't," he said. "I know," she whispered, "and I don't want you to." Jacob brushed a strand of hair from her face. She leaned close, forehead touching his, steady and real. They didn't speak more. They didn't need to. Because he hadn't just carried her across a flood. He carried her out of the life she ran from. He carried her into a world where she could finally stop looking over her shoulder. And she carried him too, in the quiet, in the stillness, in every moment she chose to stay. They built their home with their own hands. But what they built between them, that was something deeper, something lasting, something that neither of them would ever quite put down.